Okay, this is part 2 of Follow the Arrows. After we answered all of her questions, she said, making prank calls to emergency rescue services is a very serious crime. My blood turned cold. She thought we were joking. As calmly as I could, I croaked, "Ma'am, I swear to you, I've never been more serious in my life. Please send someone down here. If we're lying, you can arrest us. Just send someone, please." "Young man," she replied, "don't you have better things to do on a school night?" I heard a click as she hung up the phone. "She didn't believe us," I whispered. "Give me the phone," said Dave. He dialed the operator and spoke calmly and deliberately. "Operator, I'd like to speak to New Hyde Park Police, please." "Yes, it's an emergency." "No, I don't want 911 or dispatch. I want the police department." There was a moment's silence, and then he spoke in a deep voice. "Hello, officer. I'd like to report some teenagers causing a disturbance in the abandoned building. They're throwing things around, smashing bottles, and wrecking the place. I was able to drag a little girl down the basement. It sounds awfully bad. Just awfully bad. Someone needs to get their butt down there, here, before they hurt that little girl." Brilliant, Dave. Just brilliant, I thought. I could have kissed him. He gave the officer the location of the lot and the description. It was perfect. After answering some more the officer's questions, he begged her once again to hurry and hung up the phone. Just then, we heard a noise of a car pulling up outside. "Wow, that was fast," said Dave. "That's not the cops," I whispered. We heard a car door open and close, then heavy footsteps tramped across the gravel. Jeff ran over to the hatch with the iron bars. "We're down here!" he yelled. "Help, please, we're down here!" The footsteps were slow and deliberate overhead. A pair of work boots and dirty blue jeans appeared at the top of the stairs. Jeff stumbled back down the stairs. He looked pale. I looked up and saw a bear of a man standing there. He was intimidatingly large. He was smoking a cigarette, staring down at us. "Excuse me, sir," I began, but he just walked away, as if he hadn't heard me, and went outside. We heard him get something heavy out of his vehicle and then drag it inside. Whatever it was, he set it down with a thump. Then we saw a plastic tarp roll across the iron bars. Moments later, we heard the sound of duct tape. The hatch was closed, and we were alone, listening to the sounds of the man working. We were sure on something evil. The sort of evil that is rarely seen. The sort of evil that you don't live to tell anyone about. Suddenly, we heard a hissing sound. It was high-pitched and steady. I was confused. "Gas!" said Dave. "I think he's pumping some sort of gas in here." We ran around looking for the source, but within minutes we were growing lightheaded. Jeff collapsed in the corner. Dave rushed over and tried to help him, but he passed out as well. I slumped to the floor, feeling myself drifting into unconsciousness. I heard sirens in the distance, and then there were nothing. When I awoke, I was lying on the concrete floor. I tried to sit up, but my arms were so weak they gave out on me. My head felt like it weighed 100 pounds. I heard coughing behind me. Startled, I rolled over and saw Dave as he began to come around. There was a moment of confusion as I looked around the dusty room. Then it all snapped back in place. Adrenaline pumping. My muscles found new strength. I grabbed Dave's collar. "Dave, we got to get out of..." I stopped mid-sentence as I heard voices upstairs. "Excuse me, sir," said the first voice. "We've had reports of a disturbance out here. Have you heard anything unusual?" There was a very long pause, and then a deep, British voice said, "Yes, officer. There were some kids in this place making a hell of a racket. I came over here to run them off." "You own this property, sir?" asked the police officer. The man didn't get a chance to answer because I started screaming at the top of my lungs. Dave joined me. Jeff stared, but I was too busy running up the stairs and pounding on the hatch to pay any attention to him. Dave grabbed a couple of metal film canisters and smashed them together, making an unholy racket. If anything more was said upstairs, we didn't hear it. What we did hear was a scuffle that ensued. The two men upstairs were slamming each other into the walls. One of them fell to the floor with a heavy thud. There was a gunshot, and then another. Finally, we heard a second body slump to the floor. We all stayed silent for a moment, praying the police officer would triumphant. We heard nothing. "Officer!" I shouted through the hatch. I heard a moan, then a weak voice croaked, I think I'm hurt. I think... And then there was nothing. "Officer!" I shouted again as I pounded on the hatch. There was no response. Jeff and Dave were behind me at the base of the stairs. "We need to get the hatch open," said Dave. My heart was pounding. Dave ripped a metal bar from one of the shelves and wedged it between the iron bars. He started pushing it with all his might. A small rip appeared in the tarp that had been duct taped over the opening. I immediately began clawing at the thick plastic like a crazed rat. Jeff grabbed another piece of metal and stuck it through the bars, trying to get some leverage. We heard the groan of bending wood, followed by a loud snap. The hatch, and part of its frame, swung upwards a few inches. Something was on top of the hatch, keeping it down. I pushed through the bars with my bare hands. As Jeff and Dave redoubled their efforts, we heard something heavy and metallic topple over and crash to the ground. The hatch door opened wider and I could just about poke my head through the opening. A uniformed police officer laid several feet away. Something was sticking out of the side of his head. It was a kitchen knife! It was ghastly. The worst thing about it was that the man's eyes were still open. He was staring directly at me. His right hand was still grasping a gun. On the other side of the room, the large bear of a man was clutching onto the wall, trying to pull himself to his feet. I could see that he had been shot in the leg and in the shoulder. He looked determined. I reached out my arm and tried to get the officer's gun, but I couldn't reach it. I strained my arm to its limit, feeling the iron bars pressing into my flesh. My fingertip touched the barrel of the gun. The dying policeman managed to push the gun closer to me and I got a firm grip on it. Quickly, I twisted my arm and pointed the gun at the large man. The bars made it difficult to aim. By the time I got my arm facing the right direction, my view of the man was obstructed by the hatch door. "I've got the gun," I whispered to Dave and Jeff. "The cop's almost dead. He can't help us. The big guy is over there, but I can't get a clear shot." "How many bullets?" Dave hissed. "I don't know," I whispered. "Maybe none." Dave whispered, "We could get under him and try to shoot him through the floor." We heard the large man groan and move closer to the hatch. I tried to aim the gun in his direction and waited with bated breath for him to appear. We heard the clanking of metal canisters and I watched a large cylindrical container get pulled towards where I knew the man to be. I squeezed the trigger and fired a shot. The sound was deafening, and the kickback from the small gun was much more than I expected. My eyes were ringing, and there was sharp pain in my wrist. I heard the sound of frantic movement from the other side of the hatch door, and a noise that was like someone turning a valve. And stopping here again, because I don't want, like, this video to go long, because the thing that happens if it goes for too long for me. So yeah, then part 3, hopefully it's the last one. Like I said, this video is the story is very long. So yeah, goodbye.